For 72 long years, the USS Indianapolis was lost to the depths of the Pacific, a silent tomb guarding a dark chapter of naval history. She wasn't just another ship, she carried a secret mission that would help turn the tide of World War II, transporting parts of the atomic bomb to Tinian Island. The assignment was so hush-hush that most of her crew had no idea what they were transporting. Days later she disappeared, and no one even noticed she was gone. To truly grasp the tragedy of the Indianapolis, let's go way back to when she first came to be and remember when she was the U.S. Navy's pride. The story starts in 1930, at the Camden Shipyard in New Jersey. The USS Indianapolis, CA-35, started out as the flagship of the Portland-class heavy cruisers, a model of modern naval engineering that was known for its speed. Measuring 610 feet, it could speed through the water at 32 knots. Below deck, 8 mighty steam boilers powered 4 turbines, able to crank out over 100,000 horsepower. It was a warship armed to the teeth, including 9 8-inch guns, 12 5-inch guns, and a bunch of anti-aircraft weapons. After beginning service in 1932, she quickly earned the nickname Showboat of the Pacific Fleet, favored by President Franklin Roosevelt for his travels. The president was on the ship many times as a means of transportation, and it had the purpose of a mobile office. For the crew, this was an honor that filled them with honor even before the war. But when Pearl Harbor was attacked in 1941, the Indianapolis transformed from a presidential cruiser to a full-on war machine. She was sent out to hunt enemy ships throughout the Pacific, bombard Japanese shores, and fight in some of the fiercest battles of the Pacific War. By 1945, her name was known and marked on every victory board and chart, and her service record showed 7 battle stars. Then came the assignment that would forever be a part of her identity. In July 1945, the Indianapolis received secret orders to go to Hunters Point in San Francisco Bay, where it took on a highly classified load. Only some officers knew about the contents in the sealed containers that guards kept watch over diligently. It was listed on the paperwork as special ammunition. But what it actually was uranium and components for the soon-to-be first atomic bomb used in combat, named Little Boy. Under the cover of darkness, the items were loaded onto the ship quietly. Captain Charles B. McVay III was handed confidential orders: sail at top speed unassisted to Tinian Island. No radio communications. No contact with any other ship unless it was vitally important. At daybreak on July 16, 1945, the same day the first atomic test happened over the New Mexico desert, the USS Indianapolis slipped through the Golden Gate and disappeared into the Pacific fog, carrying a weapon with the potential to force an end to the war. 4 days later, she pulled into Pearl Harbor, took on fuel, and kept heading toward Tinian. On July 26, the crates containing the bomb parts were unloaded. The shipmen did realize that they had just helped change the world forever. Their next mission was to sail to Leyte Gulf in the Philippines and link up with the invasion force that was prepping for a possible assault on Japan. The route took them through submarine-infested waters. But since there hadn't been any recent activity, the Navy told McVay to move ahead without an escort. 2 days into the trip, the night over the Philippine Sea was pitch black, with only stars reflecting off the calm waters. Some of the crew were relaxing on deck, others watched movies in the mess hall. At 12:14 a.m. on July 30, 1945, the calm surface was suddenly disturbed by a ripple, and then, with next to no warning, 2 torpedoes slammed into the Indianapolis. The first hit near the bow, ripping the fuel tanks apart. The second struck close to the powder magazine, setting off a series of explosions that caused the ship to tear itself apart. In fewer than 12 minutes, the huge cruiser tilted sharply to its right and was gone beneath the waves. Over 1,190 people had been on board. Almost 900 managed to escape the sinking ship. But none of the men knew that the worst was yet to come. When the USS Indianapolis sank into the deep, it dragged most of its communications gear down with it. There might have been a few desperate radio messages sent, but no one at Naval Command acted on them. Some people figured they were false alarms, others assumed the ship had already arrived. So, for the next 4 days, nobody knew that 900 men were fighting for their lives in one of the most shocking ordeals in naval history. It was July 1945. The Pacific was eerily quiet. The sun beat down, which made the water burn during the day, and the sea teemed with life at night. Those who made it out of the explosion floated in small groups across many miles of ocean water. Lots of them didn't have life jackets, some were just holding on to pieces of wood or oily rafts. It was gasoline and fire on the water's surface. Without anything to drink, without food, and with no shelter from the sun, the survivors faced a variety of dangers: dehydration, exposure, and the sea itself. Those who gave in and drank seawater quickly lost their minds and had hallucinations. Some screamed, raved, dove under the surface, and never resurfaced. Sharks came soon after. Oceanic whitetips, were drawn by the scent of blood and fuel, and circled closer. They began with the dead, but soon moved to the living. The attacks came at random, quietly, without any warning. One survivor later said, "You would hear a scream, and then you were alone again." As the hours dragged on, the men began to organize themselves into groups. Some prayed, some shouted commands, and some were completely unresponsive. The sun burned their skin, while salt made their eyes crust over. Some had visions of ships in the clouds. Others would have conversations with friends who were no longer alive. By the fourth day, there were only about 300 alive, floating like ghosts in the endless ocean. Then, out of the blue, there was hope. At 10:25 a.m. on August 2nd, a Navy search plane, a Lockheed Ventura flown by Lieutenant Wilbergwinner, spotted an oil patch and tiny dots in the water while it was on watch. As the plane flew in a circle lower to the ground, the crew noticed something that sent chills down their spines: men calling for help. Gwinner dropped life rafts and smoke markers right away and radioed for help. Every plane that was available and within distance was sent out. The Navy dispatched seaplanes and patrol boats to the location. The first to arrive was a PBY Catalina piloted by Lieutenant Adrian Marks, who landed on the water even though he wasn't allowed. The waves were smashing hard on his hull, but Marks and his crew got as many men as they could onto the plane. 56 men were packed onto a plane that was made for 12. By nightfall, the destroyers reached the area. The USS Doyle, Bassett, and Cecil raced through the darkness, with spotlights shining across the floating graveyard. Debris was everywhere, with bodies, clothing, and life vests that had been torn apart by sharks. The rescuers worked tirelessly through the night, pulling men covered in burns and swollen eyes out of the sea and aboard the boat. When the last survivor was saved from the sea, only 316 of the 1,195 men who had left from Tinian were still breathing. For the Navy, the amount of loss was incredibly high. It was the biggest loss of life from a single ship in U.S. naval history. Even as the survivors got help and sympathy, a search for those to blame started. Captain Charles McVeigh III, who had been found among the rescued, was being blamed for putting his ship in danger by failing to zigzag. Even though the Japanese submarine captain who had shot the torpedoes testified that it wouldn't have changed the result, McVeigh was court-martialed and convicted. His career was over. For decades to come, the surviving crew felt a mix of honor and anguish. They had been the delivery of the weapon that ended the war. But their story had been buried under politics and blame. Families never forgot, and neither did the historians. In the 1990s, the surviving sailors and their supporters started a campaign to clear McVeigh's name. They collected documents, eyewitness accounts, and after a bunch of time passing, McVeigh was found to be not guilty. But it was too late for the captain himself. He had passed away in 1968, constantly haunted by letters from families of lost sailors. The Indianapolis rested somewhere in the dark, with no sign of where it sunk. For 72 years, the USS Indianapolis remained nowhere to be found, a legend lost to the sea. Many searched, looking through old war records and survivor testimonies, but the vastness of the Philippine Sea kept her secret. With currents shifting the sediments every season, almost every expedition came back with nothing, until one autumn in 2017. On August 19, 2017, a research vessel paid for by entrepreneur and explorer Paul Allen searched the seabed using some serious sonar equipment. Almost 3.5 miles below, the team saw a shape appearing, something long, broken, and clearly made by human hands. When they got the cameras lower to the ground, there was a hull still with the letters Indianapolis, saved by the cold and quiet. Bent gun barrels and broken plating told the story of what took place during the explosion. A bell was even laying perfectly upright surrounded by silt. Around it, small fish were seen drifting through the openings where the sailors once kept watch. For the first time since 1945, the ship and her crew had been found, not just a wreck, but a reminder of everything. The discovery then turned data into remembrance. When the data came out to the public, the families could imagine where the fathers and brothers lay. The Navy recognized the site as a war grave, to be left untouched, a memorial in everlasting darkness. Today, every piece of restored footage of the Indianapolis, every AI-enhanced photo or sonar scan, doesn't just tell a story of damage. It connects the honor of 1,195 sailors to the heavy cost of peace that followed. They carried the weapon that stopped a world war and gave their lives in silence for over 7 decades. The USS Indianapolis remains beneath 3 miles of ocean, a steel memory of responsibility, loss, and the unbelievable discovery.